While competency versus compensation was the first relationship that came to my head when constructing this graph, it really does make the naive assumption that compensation increases alongside with competency. In certain disciplines like professional sport or gaming, then this does tend to be closer to the case. But I can imagine for a more subjective field like art that doesn't hold true as well. This is because competency is not always easy to measure. If your discipline revolves around constant competition which produce measurable results, then this becomes easier. However, most fields don't actually have any standardized way to measure performance across people that participate in it. So instead, I'll change the relationship from competency versus compensation to capacity versus compensation. Capacity in this context refers to your ability to win and hold onto a given job role. Capacity is a combination of several factors like, of course, competency, but also conscientiousness, interviewing skills, office politics skills, willingness to relocate to earn more money. For sake of simplicity, we'll just combine all these factors into one simple value, capacity. Naturally, as capacity increases, the compensation will go up alongside it. Now, it's also true that, the contributing factors will have a different amount of importance depending on the field. For example, some fields, compensation may be very sensitive to location. For example, finance. In London, I'm pretty sure if you're in finance, you earn a lot more money being a finance hub for Europe, maybe even the world. It becomes more logical to make the naive assumption then that capacity correlates more strongly with compensation than just competency alone, as we've introduced some extra factors to deal with. Now, assessing one's own capacity is a crapshot, especially before you have any experience. That won't stop us though. One thing we could do is simply guess what your capacity is, and then use trial and error to increase or decrease your assessment based on how well interviews are going. Another solution is to subscribe to a channel like mine, which will down the line give a very specific software engineering assessment of your capacity based on my experience of working in the field. Or you could go one step further and get a one-on-one assessment or mentorship with someone else who is also coincidentally like me, who will help you get a better estimate of what your capacity is based on your own personal factors. Regardless of what method you use, it will still be best to only really treat it as an estimate at first. However, the more experience you gain, the more confident you can be in your own capacity. Okay, so we should understand the graph we are looking at. I will construct an example for software engineering in the UK. Now look at the y-axis and draw a horizontal line at the minimum salary you would need to stay afloat given your financial circumstances. Then watch where this line crosses with the line we have drawn to represent the relationship between capacity and compensation. And then drop that line down and you will get a value for the competency level you would need to earn that minimum. For example, if you are a single person with no dependents, then 25k would probably be enough, which would put you at a capacity of 8%. While if you are a sole provider for a family of 4, you might need 40k, which would put you at a capacity of B%. The next factor I want to look at is compensation growth. And I'm going to do a very crude job of estimating this factor, as I am no economist. I hope I'm not remembering what he said wrong, but a great man that goes by the name of Jordan B. Peterson once said that a fully grown adult can only really plan 5 years into the future at best. So if you want to estimate how much you can potentially earn in 5 years, you also have to be able to estimate how the compensation will change down the line. Now, we are really getting into guesswork territory here, so instead of trying to do any fancy calculation, we'll use what I like to call a confidence factor. This value can range from 0 to 10, 5 being a career that is stable, where salaries don't greatly increase or decrease 5 years down the line, 0 being closer to salaries which will most likely go down and even worse, redundancies will be made. Closer to 10 means that salaries will most likely go up and well-compensated jobs will be easier to find. And if you thought that was hard, things only get harder to estimate from here on out. Capacity growth is a particularly difficult one to assess. Considering most things that contribute to capacity have a prerequisite of learning and putting effort in, we can estimate your career growth based on your relative speed of picking things up and your conscientiousness. We can also use a range from 0 to 10 for capacity growth, 5 being that you don't actually improve your capacity over time. Closer to 0 means that you deteriorate, and closer to 10 means you consistently increase your capacity a noticeable amount month on month. We are also going to add another factor called compatibility, which is another crude way of saying how much fulfillment we'll get from potentially just going down that line of work. 5 being that you're somewhat indifferent, while closer to 0 means it will suck your life away, while closer to 10 means it will enrich your life. This is what the final equation will look like when you put everything together. Scary, right? Well, it's not actually that scary if I break it down for you. In the end, this massive equation will generate a number between 0 being a poo-poo score and 10 being perfect. Let's start with calculating the difference between what we believe our current capacity is and the minimum capacity required needed to make the minimal amount of viable wage. Since capacity is measured out of 100, this value can max be 100 or a minimum of -100. Next, we'll take this number and multiply it by itself. If you remember from high school maths, a positive times a positive is positive. Also, a negative multiplied by a negative is positive. In other words, the number we'll get will always become positive. Now, we will divide by the same number again. By multiplying and dividing by the same number, we make sure that the number we get back will be positive. So, now the max is 100 and the minimum is 0. This is called finding the absolute of a number, and it's important for the next step.